I'll be good.
All right, then you tell us when you're ready.
We're on.
All right, we will call this January 5th, 2026 annual members meeting at the OJRSA to order. I'd like to welcome everybody. I'm going to start by going across for the different board members. From Walhalla, we have Celia Myers and Zane Thompson. Representing Walhalla and Westminster, Mr. David Dow. Representing Seneca at Large, Mr. Marty McKee. Representing Seneca is Mr. Scott Mulder, Mr. Scott McLean, Mr. Josh Riches. I almost called you Riches. I'm Kevin Bronson. Oh, and I forgot the most important Scott to me, which is Scott Harris, who is the Westminster Utility Director. So thank you all for being here today. I would also like to recognize Mayor Tim Hall. Mayor Hall, thank you for being here. Thank you also for letting us use your wonderful depot today for this meeting. Mayor Brian Rainey. Mayor Rainey, thank you. Wish you were in this seat and I was in a different seat. Helps out. I'd also like to recognize new Westminster Councilmember Charles Morgan. Charles. And I also would like to recognize new, but not new, again, City Councilmember Jimmy Powell, who was sworn in again. He's our longest serving City Councilmember in Westminster. Jimmy, welcome. Always glad to see you. I say that to Jimmy, I've been seeing him all day, so it's kind of it's not. All right, we will now move on to the invocation and pledge of allegiance. Josh Richards did it great the first time, so last time.
Our kind and gracious Father in heaven, again, we're thankful for this beautiful day, thankful for this opportunity to gather for this OJRSA annual members meeting. We pray that, again, as the presentation is given, that it will be, that Chris will do a great job in presenting this information. We'll be able to process everything that has taken place with the OJRSA and be able to have any questions answered. Again, we're thankful to have the opportunity to serve these wonderful people here in Oconee County in this area. Pray that we can always do so in a manner pleasing unto thee. We're very thankful for this beginning of this new year and pray that it will be one of full success and pray that we'll be able to make decisions that will be the decisions that are right for the people here. That we'll be able to overcome any adversity and challenges that may face us by following thy Son and doing things that are pleasing unto thee and that will glorify thee. Again, we say these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. The flag is behind you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I welcomed everybody, and then it says introduce the attendees. So I think we covered all that. We got a great crowd here tonight. I did not welcome the Oconee County Press Corps. I see half the corps left, but the other half is here. So appreciate the Seneca Journal being present. I won't call you by name because I know you don't like it. And then we will now move on to item E, the Oconee Joint Regional Sewer Authority Annual Update. Chris Elliott.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bronson. Everyone, welcome. I'm going to try to make this a little bit shorter than I have in the past, but for that. So, I'll go ahead and start right into the presentation. So the first couple of slides I have just show a few images of the things that our folks have dealt with over the last year. So the item up here, it shows a wet well at a pump station that is located south of Westminster, where that was the before, this was after it was cleaned. The new Seneca Force Main, which you may hear me talk about a little bit later, we are replacing that as part of our consent order, as well as to upsize and enforce the road. This was funded by an outside party, so no cost to anyone in the room. No ratepayers funded this, but it shows this tied in. Down at the bottom, what is that, the left? Chlorine, this is our chlorine gas room where we currently use ton cylinders of chlorine gas to disinfect the wastewater. We will be, hopefully by the end of this month, if not, a little later than that, be switching to this system here, which is 2 totes of what's called peracetic acid. So this one product here will take the place of 2 chemicals that we currently do use, one to disinfect the wastewater, and then one to neutralize the chlorine in the water before it's discharged into the environment. Staff member collecting a sample out of our clarifier. What else do we have? Perkins Creek force main. So we had a break back in May on one of the largest, if not the largest force main that we have in our system, which is located on the other side of Conross Creek from the treatment plant. And we had, this is, I guess, about a 45-year-old line that we had this rupture at. It's the first documented case that we've had of a failure on this line as far back as I could look. The only one, it was a fairly substantial one, but we were able to get it resolved fairly quickly. We're evaluating the current influent pump station at the treatment plant, so that's something that we'll be needing to look at for maintenance and rehabilitation purposes, as well as going ahead and considering, at least for the planning for future growth, if there is an expansion of the treatment plant, how we will go about handling that influent pump station. Long-time employee Scott Justice working on a plant control system. Grease, there's been a lot of talk over the last 1.5 to 2 years about fats, oils, and grease. This shows what a grease trap should not look like. And this shows what one should look like. So this is the influence side, where where the flow is coming in from the building side, the restaurant side. The grease accumulates in that first cell, and hopefully the second cell will look like this, which is clean water that's going from there out into the wastewater system. And then lastly, a repair that staff made, the contractor made on the drain at final clarifier number 3, which we thought would take care of a major problem. And it did, until the drive system of that clarifier went out, so we're having to do an emergency repair for that, which hopefully will be complete within the next 6 months or so. I always speak about safety first. The general order of discussion is compliance, with safety, environmental, and regulatory compliance, stormwater, and any other regulatory matter that we fall under. So the first thing is safety, and I'm not superstitious, but I'm a little bit always reluctant to say this every year, that we've had another successful year. No lost time incidents, no, I don't even know that did we have any reported injuries of any kind? So obviously no violations, and we have, over the last, I think, 4 years or so, we've been a 2-time recipient of the state's OSHA award, which, for I believe it's like small entities like us. I don't know if it's strictly government or if it's government and small business, but we have that. We do have one staff whose responsibility, besides being over pre-treatment and fats, oils, and grease, is also over internal regulatory compliance. Thus, Allison McCullough oversees our safety program and has done just an unbelievable job with that in her time there. Conveyance system. So I'll talk a little bit more about the consent order in a few more minutes, but I think most, if not all of you, I know Mr. Thompson here is fairly new, so he, on the board, but he may not be as familiar with our consent order as most everybody else here has been, because you've heard about it for numerous years. Back in 2021, we agreed to an order that the state of South Carolina issued against us regarding sanitary sewer overflows. And as part of that, there were a number of items that we agreed that we would address. So I mentioned a few moments ago about the replacement of that Seneca Creek force main. That was one of the items that we've had, but we've had, a lot of wet weather, inflow and infiltration, overflows over the years. And this goes back for years and years, if not decades. So we're now having to go and make these repairs to keep the wastewater where it's supposed to be, which is in the pipe, through the treatment process, and then on to the final discharge point, which is in Conross Creek outside the gate of the treatment plant. We have had 10 known spills over the last year that total about, I'll round it up to 200,000 gallons. I believe the largest of those was that split or that broken force main that I showed you with that image of on the Perkins Creek force main. That was the largest event that we had during the year. Of those 10 spills, 7 are what qualify as reportable to the state. To be reportable to the state, now the Department of Environmental Services, it has to meet one of any of these 3 criteria. It has to be greater than 500 gallons and not recovered. So the net spill is 500 gallons or more to the environment. Any of it reaches a body of water, or it could be a potential threat to health or the environment. So if it hits any of those 3 trigger points, it's reportable to the state. So that there's a website you can go and look and see all of the SSOs that have occurred around the state. And if you look at that for us back last year, you'll see that we have 7 that have been reported. But we're required to document all of them. Thus, we have the 10 total, and the paperwork for those ones that we did not have to report are in our office, and they're subject to public review. What else did we have? Speeds Creek down here, we continue. I think I have it typed in my notes. We have had, gosh, I can't find it now. I can't find how many we've had over at Speeds Creek. Anyways, we've had close to 20 thereabouts in the last 9 years on that force main. So what I tell the board that we're doing currently is we're replacing that force main right now, one pipe segment at a time. We're going out there, repairing a break. Yes, sir.
The last line is what you're.
Oh, that's it, 18. I knew I had it in there somewhere. So the board just tonight had approved for us to enter into negotiations with a contractor or an engineer that we could have for on-call services. And the first of those things that we intend to have them begin is the design of a replacement of that entire force main. The one that's in the ground now is a ductile iron pipe, and it has been subject to electrolysis from what I understand, and it is corroding the pipe from within and from the bottom. So we're going out there and essentially getting pinholes in it that we're having to go and replace. And usually it's Seneca Light and Water that gets notified of these first, because I guess customers notify them thinking it's a water leak, and then it gets relayed to us that it is wastewater. So again, that's something that's on our radar that we need to address coming up soon. The treatment plant or the water reclamation facility, we have just received a new discharge permit from the state. These permits are good for 5 years or longer if they're extended, and through the renewal process, the state oftentimes will continue those until a new one is issued, as long as we apply for it in a timely manner. We have 2 new criteria this year, and we don't exactly know what triggered these to be put in there, and we challenged it, and this is what we got. So these are 2 items that we have to monitor for, and they may be removed from the permit. We've never had any issues that I'm aware of that aluminum and low-level mercury have caused us or the environment from our discharge point in the past. I'm not aware of anything that we've had in our biosolids or sludge that would warrant this, but nonetheless, we had this added to the permit. Again, we have to do a minimization plan where we work with industries and other parties to look to voluntarily cut waste or reduce consumption or discharge of these. One of these you see here as part of this is they have tasked us with doing inspections on dental facilities. They have them as being a source for the low-level mercury. So we're having to put together, again, this plan that we have to submit to the state, and then the state approves it, and then we begin these, and then I think we can, if I understand right, we can test out of having to continue these requirements for the duration of the permit, but we were not able to get out of it. The new permit does include the peracetic acid item that was discussed, so we can transition off of chlorine. I think we've already received the permit to operate for that system. Now we're just waiting to get approval from the state's laboratory certification department so that we can begin the testing in accordance with their standards. The last inspection we had has been close to 2 years ago, and it was satisfactory. I was a DHEC inspector for a number of years, and I don't ever remember doing one where you didn't have any notes or comments of any kind. We had no deficiencies noted of any kind 2 years ago, so we're hoping to be able to continue that because we expect the inspection sometime during this year to stay on that 2-year cycle. Our staff, we've had a number of recognitions positively from the state as well as the consent order. We have been identified up here, and I think we've received this several years in a row now, where we have a recognition for facility excellence, and that has to do specifically with the treatment plant. Again, I think that has to go a long way with we haven't had any discharge permit violations, and the inspection report was satisfactory. But we also received a national recognition, and this is the 7th year that we've received this, and it's from the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. So again, recognition of us not having any permit violations. Pre-treatment program. So we have the wastewater treatment facility is a biological treatment process. So it's put in place to handle what's called sanitary wastewater. Think of wastewater that comes from your house, that would be considered sanitary. Wastewater that comes from a business, toilet waste, that type of thing, sanitary wastewater. It is not meant, and I don't think you'll find any of them in the state that are going to be publicly owned where you have multiple users on it that are going to be in a position for treating for physical or chemical treatment, removal of metals or the like. Thus, we have a pre-treatment program. So we have 19 industries in the county that have discharge permits that we actually issue them on behalf of the state and then through the federal government. So all of these facilities have to follow federal regulations, but because of resources, limited resources, the enforcement of this and the permitting of this falls upon us. So we had to have and design a sewer use regulation that at least meets the state and federal standards, which they have to review and approve before we issue these, and that all of these 19 facilities are issued permits for what they need to do to comply to have their wastewater discharged to our system at a level where we can treat it with sanitary waste. So there will be some, we do have permitted parameters in there for them to have some metals or some excessive BOD or some other, I'll call them pollutants that we can handle, but not at a level that a lot of these may be generating. So you'll have some of these facilities, they'll have their own treatment on site where they treat the wastewater before they discharge it to us. So that's what's considered a pre-treatment program, is they're pre-treating the wastewater before it gets to us. We have had EPA inspections in the past, and we had a DHEC inspection back again March of 2024. That one was a considerable inspection, 34 pages, where they actually go out and do inspections with us at some of our industries. And again, no deficiencies were noted at any time during that inspection. So again, satisfactory report. Compliance by the industries has been very good, nearly 100%. Very few non-compliance, and of those non-compliances that we've had, those have been minor, that just generated an automatic notice of violation, and that was the extent of it. There was corrective action made, and no further action had to be taken on our part. We did not issue any further or elevated enforcement action against anyone during the last year either. No, we didn't issue a consent order or any other type of order, or issue any type of fine to any industries, which, you know, we are delegated with that authority as well through the state and federal government with the pre-treatment program and the sewer use regulations. We do have one non-significant permit source, and this is just right up the street, and our friends from Walhalla here would be familiar with this, because we've had, over the years, there's been some overflows associated with some large solids that have somehow got flushed down the toilet in the jail cells, correct? So the Oconee County had, you know, back in 2020, I think it was 2022, a consent order was issued against the county with the item that needed to be addressed was having this debris removed from the sewer system before it ever reached, in this case, the city of Walhalla's pipes. So they went through the design process and procurement and installation of a bar screen, which is essentially a large rake that cleans these materials out before it ever goes into the sewer system. And they should be getting their operating permit any time now. I think there's a meeting or an inspection up there later this week where they're going to be looking at this. But this, again, is permitted through the state. I know how to get a permit to operate for that facility. And then special pre-treatment devices, those are like the grease traps, the oil water separators, and some of those other items that you have, maybe at car washes, restaurants, hospitals, and those types of things. So that was a matter that was brought up in our consent order, was that we needed to strengthen our sewer use regulation, particularly with fats, oils, and grease, and then begin enforcing this regulation on the utilities that were discharging to us. So we developed, that took several years for us to do. But last year, our inspector looked at 174 what we call special pre-treatment devices. And as you can see here, of those, found 9 violations that were all corrected, and 3 required more formal enforcement action. In that case, it was a notice of violation but that didn't trigger any type of a fine or anything like that. It was just really encouraging them to take action to correct the issues that they had. Laboratory, no inspections on that. Stormwater, no recent inspections, and we're still in compliance with both of those. The consent order. I'll kind of go through this fairly quickly because I think most everybody's heard this before. If you have any other questions about it, I'll stick around afterwards and talk one-on-one with any of you. But we're still moving forward with the items that we have to address, that we agreed to, that we would address with the state back in 2021. And it's going to be, I figure it's going to be a number of years before we're going to be able to get out from under this as well. There's going to be capital projects that have to take place, further inspection of pipelines, and rehabilitation work. Let's see here. Consent order. This is a list of projects that we have undertaken in 2025 that addresses items specifically in the consent order. Again, I won't touch on very many of these, but we continue to make progress as we're able to. The SCIP money that I think every city in here, I believe, was a recipient of some of those for utility projects. We received close to $10 million to do that. We had we had 2 of the projects came in under budget, which allowed us more money to be able to push toward additional rehabilitation work, more so that we thought we would be able to undertake at the time that we did the project. So we're in the process now of this one right here, which is the manhole resiliency plan. So we're hoping to go ahead and begin renewing some of these manholes to prevent the I&I, or the inflow and infiltration, from occurring. The list of projects that we have budgeted or planned for the current year now. Again, any questions about this, I'll be happy to talk about it afterwards. I should say, by the way, too, I'll put this presentation on our website sometime tomorrow so that you can go and gather whatever you'd like to see off of there. It'll be in a PDF format for you to be able to Now, I debated on whether I even wanted to do a presentation this year, or whether I just wanted to get up and speak, but I like seeing this. I don't know if other people like seeing the visual illustrations or not, but I think it helps to look and see these trends over, a long period of time. So the red lines you can see here show the maximum capacity that we can treat at the wastewater plant, which is 7.8 million gallons. It was expanded in the mid-90s from 5 to 7.8. At this mark here, which is I think 6.24 million gallons per day, we have to begin the process of initiating expansion of the facilities. The yellow line shows where the state has us as far as how much flow we have permitted to the treatment plant. It is what we call a flow allocation checkbook. But when you look at the actual flow, which is the blue line, we're nowhere near what the state has us permitted at. This is our average daily flow. So the reason why this matters is our average daily flow is around, you see here, about 2.5 million gallons. There was a time this year where we had a daily flow in excess of 8 million gallons a day, where we had rainfall and we were still storing rain on and off site that had to be treated, that got in the system. That's the I&I that I speak of earlier. If we can adjust, and I say we as a collective here, the sewer authority as well as the cities are able to remove or reduce the amount of inflow that's getting into these pipelines, I think we can petition the state to get this lower so that we have additional room before we have to begin looking at a treatment expansion. Did I make sense by what I said there about how the state looks at one number, we actually have another number, but this, we actually see flows up here. So, we'd love to get this down because that won't cost us anything. We gain capacity without having to do an expansion. And then the green line shows our average daily industrial flow. And our industrial flow, for the first time in a number of years, actually went up this past year, and that was because we had a facility that put an operation that had been mothballed back into service. It was a refinery, so we had to renew a permit for them so they can get back in operation. There. Okay, another one. So about 3 years ago, we changed the way that we did our billing. Those that have been on the board a long time know we issued 3 bills. Was it per month, Lynn? We just billed the cities 3 times a month, right? Or I'm sorry, once a month for the 3 cities. And it was the same amount for 11 months a year, and then there was an adjustment month, if I remember correctly, or it may have been all 12 of them. It may have been the same. But we changed, and we now bill the same way that any of the cities bill for their water use, which is based on consumption, or in this case, their discharge. So if they have a water meter, and that water meter is connected to a property with sewer, then if they use 1,000 gallons of water, they bill for 1,000 gallons of wastewater. So that changed in, I think it was in July 2023, if I remember correctly, but we began receiving information to put this in place prior to that time. So we have a little bit more data than what you see on here for just a half year. So you can look and see these trends here. So the OHRSA's portion of the bill, and do all of the cities here have a line item that shows the city's charge and then our charge on there? No. So Walhalla does. I know Seneca, they did that a number of years ago. So we take, whenever we get the monthly reports from the cities, we go and we determine these numbers here. And we use this for budgetary purposes for the following year, anticipate what we may be able to receive in revenue. So the first year, it was $31.64 for the typical house that was on our system. We used actual flows, not a theoretical 5,000 gallons per home number that the state would use. We looked at the actual use of a home for a month's time. And you can see that use has trended down over the last 3 years for us, which could be, it'll happen with replacing old fixtures with more, modern fixtures that have a lower consumption rate or use rate. These water, I think they call water sense faucets and toilets and, reduced flow. So that wasn't unusual for me to see, but I'm going to be interested in watching this over the next 2 or 3 more years, because where this, as you can see, this year and this year, we charge the same rate. There's no difference there. We had a rate increase for this current fiscal year, so it's reflected there. So there's a difference there of 18 cents per account per month. Is that right for the residential user? But the reduction here, again, interested in seeing how that goes as we move forward. Permitted flows by the different types. We permitted 206 new residential homes. Most of those are going to be in a subdivision type of development, not a one-off. The entire subdivision gets permitted as a single, each home at one time in every case. And then 12 new non-residential locations received permits from us to discharge. And of all those combined, totaled about 81,000 gallons that we permitted for calendar year 2025. Growth, I always talk about this a little bit. In this map that you see, this was from last year, but it's not going to change very much. Whenever we get a phone call asking, is sewer available, or I get a request from Oconee County or any, a city asking if we have sewer available at a location, I document the parcel number that they're asking about, and I document the acreage. And that's what allows me to kind of figure out where are people looking to have sewer, where are they looking to develop. Whether they ever do or not, I don't know with a lot of these, but these hot spots show the calls or the areas that we get the most calls about. So the numbers are over here, the breakdown of the 160 total calls that we fielded last year, but it was for about almost close to 5,000 acres that were asked about. And all of these numbers here were pretty much in line with what I had received last year. Impact fees. The impact fees, the way these were determined, changed from fiscal year 25 to the current year of 26. So it was determined that we would go from using the water meters, which we had done, I think, for 3 or 4 years, back to the methodology that we used where we had a model system of the DHEC or DES hydraulic loading calculations. And this will show a sample of the sheet. So if somebody's building, say, a bowling alley, the state has a standard number here that, what's that say? Like 8 per employee, they say 8 gallons per employee per day. And then per lane, looks like 94, 96. So whenever one of these is built, the developer now will provide me with this information, and that's what is used to determine what the impact fees will be. Questions on this? All right. Growth inside and outside city limits. So this is looking at the utility as a whole, no matter where it's served. So over the last 3 years, since we began tracking those trends of usage, we looked also, besides residential use, at the non-residential as well, and the number of accounts, sewer customers or accounts that they have on here. So you can see and compare 2023, 2024, and 2025, and each of these shows what those numbers are as the years move forward. And this is with information that we get from each of the cities each month. 20-year master plan, this was completed in July 2024. We use this as our guide for budgeting and preparing for the future, not just us, but it's referenced in our development policy that any development has to consider any of these functions that are identified in here as well when they're making plans for sewer infrastructure. So that, and there's been discussion and talk the last few months with between myself and the board and committees about developers helping to account for the growth that's going to be taking place. This document will help do that they have to make considerations where they have to consider downstream users and possibly even upstream as well when they're making development. That what we do not want to run into is having a lot of pump stations. There's parts of nearby county, not us, but one close by I won't name, that they did not have such a program in place. And they allowed any development to be built at any time, and it could be served by a pump station. But what you ran into is dozens and dozens of pump stations where you could easily have had a gravity sewer, but they didn't have a policy in place to have them to look into how can this area best be served over the long term, instead of just putting pump stations in. And there's a rumor, and I don't know if this is true or not, but there was 2 subdivisions and they could have shared a pump station. Well, it was owned by 2 property owners that didn't like each other and they didn't want to share it. But even the cost of a pump station was too much for them to share. So they each built their own little tiny pump station. What that does, that cost gets added on to the utility and ultimately the users, because you've got costs that are going to be incurred every month. You've got power costs, you're going to have water costs, you're going to have replacement of pumps and motors. So the last thing we want are more pump stations. So we're trying everything we can to encourage, I guess, like a smart growth by considering the bigger picture instead of just that microscopic or myopic look at development in time. As part of the master plan, there's a list, and all of these, you won't be able to see them, but you can see them on the website. They're there already, but you can see a list of projects that have been identified as not even suggestions, but possibilities over the next 20 years. And you can see the whopping total for these projects. And I need to point out, July 2024 dollars, and this is for OJRSA infrastructure only. So not, whatever the cities may have on top of that would be, in excess of that $304 million. And I should say too, that there's 2 plant expansions incorporated into there, a phase 1 and a phase 2 over the 20-year time frame. Phase 2 of the I-85 sewer, it's been operational for right at a year now. We have a couple of small projects, and why I even bring this up is I didn't know if there'd be anyone from the county that attended tonight or not, but I wanted to address it in case there was. We've got a couple of small items. We've got to get water down to the pump station at the Welcome Center. And there's a creek that runs, it bisects this green line here, and we've got to find a way to get across it. So we're working with DOT to look at a way of putting a gate to access it from the interstate, or we're gonna have to design a bridge or a culvert system. So we're currently working on both options there. The county this goes back to a couple of years maybe, the county had approved for and signed an agreement for an addendum to the contract with the engineer to design both of these, so they're both kind of moving forward. The best option from the financial standpoint would be for them to allow us to put a gate here and access it that way. But I got an email about it today. We'll see if that continues moving forward. Let's see here. The Seward South Phase 3. The board has heard about this. It is a line that would extend from around in front of Yoder's down in Fairplay toward exit 4 to serve a parcel with a pump station that would be, I guess it would be for speculative growth, between exit 4 and the heart of the Fairplay Village. I'm happy about it. Since we got flow down that way, we've got infrastructure, we need more flow. So we need, roughly, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of gallons per day of flow we need for that system to operate as a true wastewater system. We have hydrogen sulfide problems. We've got lack of flow. We've got solids settling out in the force main. Just because of the lack of turnover that you have, it takes days, if not weeks, for some of that water to get from Golden Corner to the treatment plant. And the more flow we can get on there, the better it will be to operate as a true sewer system, and we won't have to worry about those side effects that we're having to deal with now. For the Phase 3 part, and this is a letter that I wrote to Amanda Brock back in March of last year now. It was a conditional acceptance letter stating that we would accept the flow from the project. That's required for us to have sent down to the state for them to get their construction permit. They have to have a place that's willing to treat the wastewater generated from the project. But what we do not have currently is an agreement with Oconee County to operate and maintain that facility. I think their intent is for them to own it and to have us as the contract operator for it. Thus, that's why we had to provide that letter for them, identifying them as the owner, but us as the treatment provider, as well as the O&M provider for it as well. So, this may be addressed on its own as we continue moving through the reconstitution process that we're working on, that I'll talk about in just a minute, or we may need to go ahead in the meantime and begin working with an agreement that we have with them. We currently have an agreement with them to perform O&M, but it's only for the Golden Corner pump station. It doesn't extend. I think it specifically states Phase 1 of the Sewer South project, which is only the Golden Corner pump station and the force main that runs to the treatment plant. Regional sewer provider. So this goes to what I was speaking about a moment ago regarding the reconstitution process. Is everybody here familiar with the process that, you may have heard it discussed about consolidation or considering consolidation or reorganizing? Is everybody familiar with that? So that's what this has to do with. So we're kind of now in the third or fourth phase of this project. It began with a grant application to the state after we were encouraged to consider such action by the state. Then we had to do a feasibility study. That feasibility study was completed. That led to the creation of an ad hoc committee to develop recommendations that ultimately the next committee, which is the current committee, would work to enact or consider for enacting. So the presentation was given, I think it was July 15th, middle of July of this year. You guys may have been, I believe the whole board here was at that meeting at the presentation at the Tri-County campus. But there were 5 items that came about from the last committee to the current committee for consideration. And, just touch on those real quick. All collection systems should be consolidated into one combined system. The authority should be reconstituted with a 5-member board of commissioners. The governance documents of the reconstituted authority shall basically be the current ones revoked and develop new documents. Establish a smaller working group or ad hoc committee to oversee the initial implementation and to develop a communications plan so everybody's receiving the same information. So I know that there's been questions that has been presented to the committee by council or by staff or maybe both, and those answers have been provided, and they'll continue to be as we receive those over the next, however long the committee is. So anytime you have any questions, you or your council, just have those directed to us. It could be either through your representative on the committee, on the OJRSA ad hoc committee, or you are more than welcome to submit those to yourself, and we'll get answers not just to you, but we'll provide that answer to everybody so everyone's on the same page. Requests for the satellite systems, basically the same things we have every year. Participation in the Reconstitution Committee, the committee that I just discussed. A continuation of seeking and taking corrective actions on inflow and infiltration sources. Develop and update a capital improvement plan that includes rehabilitation of the system, budgeting for current and it's supposed to say and future repairs, and refraining from pushing debris into our pipes when cleaning the upstream system. So this is a slide I've used before, but when cleaning the lines upstream with this were really good, that on pipes that weren't ours, but what happened was all the debris just got pushed into our pipes and left there. So we had to go out there and clean it. What you see there peeling off is grease. And then finally, completion. So right now, I think this coming April will be the third one. Each of the cities has been providing a completed report on actions that have taken place over the past 6 months, and then for the coming 6 months as part of a corrective action plan that each of the cities developed. And that all rolls up into our consent order. So we're addressing, the part of what the state expected us to do with the consent order is for us to revise our sewer use regulation, but enforce it as well. So that's where that portion of that comes up. And then same slide every year. Are you in this? You didn't show up at this day, did you? Were you at that tour when y'all came and toured the treatment plant?
Oh, pardon me?
Mm-hmm.
No,
I don't think you were there that day, but this is AQD. They had a board meeting out at our treatment plant last year, and they did a tour of it afterwards. And it was, Kyle loves, well, you see John here, Kyle, he loves doing these things. So I might ask regularly, y'all do tours, and I've had very, very few people show up. So again, we're open to the public. We'd love for you to come and learn and see what we do. So contact me, contact Kyle, our operations director. We'd love to host you for as short or as long of a day as you want to make of it. And with that said, I'll call Mr. Bronson. He was our past chair, but he just got reappointed, so current chair. And
Did you
myself.
put Kern on there before I was elected?
No, I did that in between meetings.
Just for the record, I did strike out past board members.
Yeah, I did that in between meetings, had to revise that, but, we'll be happy to answer any questions or take whatever comments that you may have at this time. Yes, sir.
Before we get into any questions here, I just want to say, back in December, our board meeting in December, we heard about the new state regs where individual sewer authorities where they're gonna have to monitor aluminum and mercury. And of course, we had a small discussion about somehow we're gonna have to look at dentist offices to make sure they're not putting mercury into the system. We've not had any lengthy discussion about this, not yet. But I just want to tell you, mayors, when you start hearing from these dentists, tell them, please, it's not our fault. Don't drill on our teeth for that mercury. Okay? It's not our fault.
Well, this was something that back a number of years ago, DHEC, and I don't know if it was the environmental side or the health side of DHEC before the two agencies split apart, they were to regulate the dental offices themselves. We weren't going to have to be involved in it at all, but there is a specific set of regulations that addresses dental facilities. So somehow after these number of years, this got passed on to us, and I don't know how many others in the state, as far as wastewater utility providers, are having to go and do this. Again, we have to develop a plan. We have to submit that plan to the state for them to review and approve. The first draft that we submitted has been denied, so we're having to revise that, but we don't, it's like a target that we don't know where the target is. We're in the dark here, so we're having to develop this from scratch, and we don't know ultimately what we're aiming at, or what they want to do. So we've got a number of, we've got several months to get this in place, but it's just a little bit of a inconvenience, and I use that term instead of saying frustration, that this has been put on to mainly our staff, Allison McCullough and Dalton Justice, who's our commercial pretreatment guy. They'll be overseeing all of this, completely unexpected.
Are there any other questions or comments from those of you in the audience? We appreciate you being here tonight. Your enthusiasm for wastewater shows on your faces. Any comments and questions? Mayor Rainey?
Chris, on the I&I, in the last year, I know you're showing that we're seeing a decrease. How's Westminster doing? How's our city doing?
We track this, and we send this out, and Amanda Kelly, our records clerk, will send this out, is in fact, I guess every week, every 2 or 3 weeks. And Westminster's trended way down. I could pull up the sheet and take a look at it now, but it's trended down a pretty significant amount. I can pull it up after we.
I know we've been doing a lot of improvements, upgrades, and I just wondered what the effect was.
Yeah,
showing up.
the funny thing about this stuff is we won't ever really know the true impact of it because everything changes, Just like this year, we got 46 inches of rain, and it wasn't all that long ago that 46 inches of rain would have been considered to be an average rainfall for the year. So I went back to 2015, 2016. I started in 2017. So I went back to the records as far back as I could find from the time I started. This is the least bit of rain that we've had over a 12-month period since I've been here, as far as a calendar year, that 46 inches. I think before that, the least amount that we'd received was about 51 or 52 inches. And I say all that because last year for us was a very dry year, even with 46 inches of rain. Of that 46 inches, over almost 23 of those, almost half of it, we experienced in, I think it was March, April, and August. So half of the rainfall we got in those 3 months. So it's just difficult to say. You usually see more I&I issues in the wintertime because the water table's higher. You're not you're having evaporations not taking place. You're not having uptake by the trees. So we'll kind of see more, I think, if we move through the winter and if the rainfall picks back up to a more normal level. I know that doesn't give you an answer, or certainly not an answer you were hoping for, but it's kind of one of these, we'll have to wait and see. But the numbers that we do have showed a significant trend downward. In fact, I'm gonna make a guess. So make sure in the minutes it states this, that, yeah, I'm thinking it was about 85% of the flow that we saw last year. That number is kind of in my mind.
All right, thank you, Chris. Any other questions or comments? All right, Chris, as always, you did a very thorough job. We appreciate you updating us. Anything else that you have for us?
Well, the only other thing I can say is this room used to be kind of full when we used to feed people to come to this.
Oh, we're gonna get paid?
So, no, I do thank you for coming out. I do thank Wahala for hosting us. It's a beautiful place. And again, I'll get this on the website, and you can download it from there. And if I think about it, I'll try to email it out to everybody that we have attending tonight. But because of size, I don't know if it'll go through. So if you don't get an email from me, just check the website by lunchtime tomorrow, and you should be able to get it on there, or just give me a call.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And unless there is any objection,